In this how-to, I'm going to show you how to use the lap timer feature in Flight Plan. To turn it on and off, all you need to do is go into aircraft settings, enable your lap timer, or disable it if you don't want to see it. And when you go into Cockpit Map, you'll have a lap timer. The lap timer is just basically a hands-free stopwatch. It'll reset itself as you pass over the waypoints, and I'll talk about how exactly that works in flight. We're going to do a couple of different things. First, I'm going to create an actual circuit that I'll do some laps of so you can see a multiple lap race, let's say, and then I'll also show how you can use it in a bush trip or any other flight if you just want to track your time between waypoints to compare against the nav log, or just so you don't have to fool with the actual stopwatch. So I've chosen Valencia, Spain because I'm a MotoGP motorcycle racing fan. So in Valencia, there is very close to the airport a racetrack, Ricardo Tormo Circuit. And what we'll do is we'll just do a lap of the outside edge of the actual racetrack because it should be pretty easy to spot. Let's zoom in and maybe even a little more here. I'll start my race at whatever this is, probably turn 2 of the circuit itself, but for me it's my starting waypoint, and I'll need to set my altitude either at 0 so that it doesn't consider altitude, or set it to whatever distance above sea level I want to allow. So if you're racing through mountains or whatever, each waypoint can have a different altitude. I mean, obviously every waypoint can have its own altitude, but that will be the maximum allowable altitude for that waypoint for the lap timer to count it. And I'll pick the bend in the bleachers here as my turn 1, and 200 is not going to be good enough. Let's set that at 1,000 for the purposes of my demonstration. I don't need to be missing waypoints because of altitude. And then we'll choose the hairpin here where everyone eats it, which in reality is the final turn for the home straight. Hairpin. And then the actual start finish lines right there in front of the grandstands, but we're going to finish here at turn 1. Okay, and let me go back and reset my start to something reasonable because I think 200 feet would be right at track level. Let's see what we got. Oh, let's give it a name. Okay, and I'm using the NX Cub because we're going to be so close together by aircraft standards that I'm going to be wanting to move pretty slow, obviously to make these turns, but also so you can see the lap timer. So we'll switch back to road map, zoom out a bit. Flight Plan is expecting me to do is take off from Valencia Airport, make my way to turn 1 of Ricardo Tormo, at which point it'll start the lap timer. It'll then time until I hit this next waypoint. It'll display the sector time and then start timing to the next point, display its sector time, and so on until I hit the finish, at which point it'll record my lap time and it'll wait to see if I pass over the start line again to start a new lap. Now, if I was to fly over this, say in the Mustang at full speed, it would probably pick up all 4 waypoints at the same time. Word to the wise. I'll talk about that more in flight. So let's go ahead and fly this. Okay, so we've spawned at Valencia, and actually Flight Simulator, since I didn't adjust the push pins, it just dropped me at the end of the runway anyway and stalled me out. I'll go ahead and fix the flight plan before I upload it to simflightplan.com. As always, these will be free to fly. I'll include the link to it in the description box. I don't know how useful it is, but it'll be out there if you want to fly it. As you can see, the lap timer is displayed. The map will be getting a facelift. This is actually a feature release with the lap timer. There's more features coming with the map facelift, but we're waiting on Google beta features to be less beta before we move on. But we needed to get this feature release out here so we could get to work on two-way communication with Flight Simulator. It's showing lap 1. There is no previous lap. I'm at the airport. I haven't started timing yet. Now, I'm close to my first waypoint. I'm within 7.3 nautical miles of the start point, so I can actually go ahead and set my altimeter now to make sure that my altitude is accurate. Depending on how long your course is, you may have to do it a couple of times, especially if you're drastically increasing and decreasing altitudes. You may have to reset that in flight if you're tracking the altitudes of the waypoint. So I've got 1,000 feet in there. I'm going to have to be under 1,000 feet. If you don't want to worry about altitude, altitudes and you just want to hit the waypoints, just leave it at 0 and it'll disregard altitude and just record your progress past the point. So again, the main reason I chose Valencia was it's very close to the airport and I want to be moving pretty slow for the purposes of the demonstration. This will allow me to stay around 100 knots in the X-Cub. Again, if I'm moving too fast, it will potentially pick up multiple waypoints and potentially start and stop my lap at the exact same time. This allows me to fly at about half throttle in the X-Cub. At 100 knots, I'll need to be within 200 feet of the waypoint for it to detect me. The ratio is based on 1 second of flight time. So whatever distance you cover in 1 second while you're flying at whatever speed you're flying, that's how close to the waypoint you need to be. So at 500 knots, that's going to be like 1,700 feet. It's not a linear ratio. So again, at 100 knots, it's 2 seconds of latitude and longitude by 2 seconds of latitude and longitude. And then from there, it goes up exponentially until you get to about 500 or 600 knots. I don't know how many seconds of latitude and longitude it is at that point, but basically you're looking at somewhere between 1,800 feet and 2,000 feet of space that you need to pass through for the waypoint to pick you up, which at 500 or 600 knots is a really tiny spot. Now these don't work like the barrels in the Reno Air Race because the Reno Air Race has an infield. The barrels know at all times whether you're inside or outside the track. In Flight Plan, you could have a linear track that has no infield. Like if you go to the YouTube channel and watch the Canyonlands timed run, you'll see it's all the way up the Colorado River for one complete lap, and it zigzags back and forth, so I'm not always passing to the left or to the right of the waypoint. Okay, so we're coming up on our first waypoint, and this is so tiny I need to zoom way in, but we know our first waypoint's right there at turn 1. So as I pass over turn 1, you'll see that my lap timer elapse time will start, and then as I come up on my first waypoint, which is the bend in the bleachers, it will count my sector time, put it in the previous, and then just continue counting elapsed for the lap. And then here's our hairpin. And I'm going to use the parking lot, and I'm going to have to dive bomb one of the grandstands here to make my finish line, but my finish line is right there at the corner. So now it's counted lap 1. It's waiting for me to pass over my start point to increment the lap number. Now it's waiting for me to hit my next waypoint to increment the sector time, and so on through my course. So let me go ahead and just crank out a few laps, being careful not to exceed 1,000 feet. I might actually be able to take this course a little bit faster in this aircraft, but if I was to get up around 120, 130 knots, the waypoints might start overlapping, basically. So if you're going to be racing something fast, you want to make sure that your waypoints are far enough apart that it makes sense to time. That's basically the reasoning behind the 1 second distance. I guess we'll do one more lap and then we'll just cross the finish line, and that's that. This hairpin's a lot easier when I can start in the bleachers, not so much for the racers. I'll actually go down the straightaway this time. There's pit lane. So now when I cross my finish line, I'm going straight out. I'm not going to cross my start line again. It's going to count my lap, 44 seconds, and then I fly back to the airport and I'm done. We don't actually need to do that. Let's just escape out and look at our lap times. Now, if you close your cockpit map mid-lap, the elapsed timer stops. The timer is a part of the cockpit map. If you start a lap and don't finish it and exit out here to the main form, it won't finish timing that lap for you. Now you can pause Flight Simulator all you want and it'll continue counting. Don't close cockpit map if you're in the middle of timing a timed lap, otherwise it'll stop timing your lap. But you can exit out and it will show your current lap times as many times as you want to record. Boy, that was pretty consistent, huh? 44, 44, 42, 43. So it records your start time and then your sector times for each one of your waypoints and then your net lap time. And then if you want to share it with your friends and for bragging rights, you can put whatever you want, keep it clean, and include your lap times. And if you have an image, you can include your image. Otherwise, you'll just get the flight plan default image. And then when it uploads to simflightplan.com, it will be in the download section under your username. Of course, it's the most recent one, so it's right there. But if you search by your name and the flight plan name or some portion of it, or if you and your friends post bragging rights, you can just search by whatever the flight plan name was. And you'll see it gives us the normal waypoint breakdown, although I could have skipped that too, but it gives you the distances between each of them. So you can see these were really, really close together. And then here's the individual lap time breakdown for TechStan on 5/16 at 4:01 p.m. local time. So that's how to share your lap times if you want to share your lap times. Now, again, the map is getting a facelift. As a part of that, we're also adding features to the website, leaderboards, and real-time sector timing online for current racing. There's other features coming, but we're waiting on Google to finish some things up before we can implement our part. That's how to create a little track as a race. There's already a flight plan out there called Canyonland's Timed Run, where your start point is at the beginning of the canyon and the end point is at the Petrified Dunes, which is at the exit of the river canyon there. So that's two ways to set up circuits, if you want to call them that you can race anywhere on the planet. So I opened the Nevada Bush Trip. It's called Nevada, but I believe it's called Yosemite in the activities. This is the entire Bush Trip, and actually this is probably a good one to use as an example because it flies the Savage Cub, which has no electronics whatsoever. So not only will you have the advantage of not having to start and stop your stopwatch in the nav log, you can have your route on your cockpit map. You're going to need the waypoints so that you can time them. Again, this is a good example in the Savage Cub because it has your plain vanilla cockpit. So I'm just going to run the very first leg of it. So let me go ahead and delete all my other waypoints. If you want to know how to open and modify Bush Trips, see our other videos in the how-to playlist. There's one additional thing I'm going to need to do because you need to time from the center of your airport. If I put a waypoint right here in the center of my runway, it's going to start timing immediately as I roll down the runway. And if you're okay with that, that's fine, but you're going to lose time because you're not going fast enough. And, you know, obviously in this case, we're going to have to bank and actually get on course. So if you really want to be correct against what your nav log is expecting, you should probably put your waypoint to one side or the other. It doesn't matter. You're going to be within 1 second, but you want to make sure you're far enough off the runway that as I'm rolling down the runway, and of course in the Savage Cub, I'm not going to be going very fast anyway, but I need to be far enough off the runway that I'm not going to trigger that waypoint as I pass it. Okay, so that's just a decision that's up to you. Let me zoom back in here. I'll select my first waypoint to make sure I'm selected over here because I want to make sure I drop my next waypoint immediately after it. And I'm going to drop it here. And this is my start timing. And I'm not going to use an altitude for that. I don't actually care. And in fact, this whole flight plan has 0 altitude, so we're just not going to worry about it. Otherwise, you'd have to go through the map and check your altitudes because this does go up and down a little bit, I think. So now what I'm going to do is take off. I'm going to bank left, swing around, start my timer, and then start timing to my first waypoint 4 miles away. And then if I really want to be technical about it, I could put another waypoint again in the center of the airport, fly over it to stop my timer, or you could put one out here on the approach somewhere. At that point, you're already at your destination, so it doesn't really matter. And let's go ahead and fly it. Okay, so obviously there's not a whole lot to set up in the Savage Cub, so we're ready to take off. Normally you would take off, fly over the center of the runway, start your timer. In our case, we're going to do that. We're going to take off, fly over the center of the runway, but I'm not going to start my timer. I'm going to let the lap timer do it for me. Now I'm going to leave my map zoomed way in. Typically I wouldn't fly at this sort of zoom level, but just so you can see as I pass over the waypoint, it starts as I pass over it. There's the end of our runway. I'm going to loop back around so you can see the timer start. If your GPS follow is not turned on at the time you pass your first waypoint, it won't start timing. So if you need to fly around and get your trim set and get ready, just leave your GPS follow off until you're ready to start, and then turn on GPS follow so it'll be ready to start the timer. Once you've started, it actually will detect your waypoints, whether GPS follows on or not. Okay, and as we pass over the waypoint, the last timer starts, and according to the nav log, should be 3 minutes 7 seconds to my next waypoint. Now, in the Savage Cub, you're going to need to be pretty precise with your flying, because that's in kilometers per hour, not knots. It's about the same as when I was at the Ricardo Tormo Circuit in the X Cub doing 100 knots. I don't remember the conversion, but I'm not doing much over 100 knots right now, if at all. It's recorded my sector time to POI1, which the nav log says should have taken me 3 minutes 7 seconds, took me 3 minutes 21 seconds. Now, of course, you're going to have to follow the flight path exactly to hit your waypoints, but if your goal was to check your timing against the nav log timing is as the crow flies between the waypoints. So, you know, where I would normally fly along the river for fun, in this case, I'm flying the exact course between the waypoints. Otherwise, the timing on the nav log won't be correct for my distance anyway. Okay, so we're coming up on our bridge, which is our next waypoint. So you can see as we recorded our second point of interest, sector time, it was 8 minutes 45 seconds. I was supposed to be at 7 minutes 50 seconds, and I had to climb a bit, so that makes sense. And there's a little bit of wind, but mostly I had to do some climbing, so I'm running a little behind now. We go down and see the bridge, but you know, I'm running behind, so we got to keep going. Another tip and trick though, if you'll notice, I've been selecting my waypoints as I pass them as well. So if I select them in my drop down and turn my GPS follow on, it holds my current waypoint. See our other videos if you want to know how that works. But now it'll give me the distance to my next waypoint, which the Savage Cub doesn't have the instrumentation. I think if I was just flying the Savage Cub for fun out of world map, it would still track my waypoints. I think it's not tracking the waypoints in the flight plan because it's a bush trip. I'm cheating. Turn me into the flight simulator, please. Actually, let's go ahead and miss one of these so that I can show you at the end what happens if you miss a waypoint. Okay, and just like before, especially in the Savage Cub, make sure you hold your course all the way to the waypoint. Now we've picked up our timing again. Our elapsed is from the beginning of the lap. And now our last from 3 to 4 was supposed to have been 3 minutes, 8 seconds, but it's really more like 6 minutes, 42 seconds, which for me is the cumulative of these two since I missed waypoint 3. Okay, that'll maybe make more sense at the end. You probably want to zoom in, this may be too close, but you may want to zoom in pretty close for the waypoints just because the Savage Cub is so slow. But you can see where it picked it up, I mean the distance on the map, so I probably would be okay at 15. The other thing you want to be careful about just in general is if you zoom way out, there is a slight distortion, I guess, depending on your zoom level and where it is actually over the ground. It seems like Google Maps, as you zoom out, zooms you out towards the equator, as if you're zooming out in space, but towards the equator instead of directly over your point on Earth. You know, one handy thing I didn't really think about, but the lap timer keeps track of my previous waypoint for me, so if I forget to manually reset my waypoint, I can just make the drop down match previous and turn on GPS follow, and that'll give me my distance to my next waypoint. Guess that's the tips and tricks portion of our show. Okay, so that's our last waypoint, and then again, I didn't create a finish waypoint at the center of my runway. I didn't care because I'm going to be slowing down. It's not going to be correct anyway. But my net time plus landing here is going to be pretty close. 41 minutes is what it should have taken me, and I came up with 43 minutes plus, you know, another 2 or 3 minutes here while I slow down and land. We should complete our bush trip leg, and we've got 51 minutes from the time I clicked ready to fly until now, but I've got 43 minutes of actual flight time from Breckenridge Airport. Let's zoom way back out here. From Breckenridge Airport to Inyokern. Now, I should have created another waypoint over Inyokern Airport if I wanted to really match the nav log time and fly over, you know, I should have flown over Inyokern Airport and then loop back around and land. So the lap timer ignores the first and last waypoints. It only times from the first blue waypoint to the last blue waypoint, although that's not always the case. I mean, they're gray because they're airports, but you can start in flight and end in flight if you want to. But now you've got the complete breakdown of your leg in this case. So that's the general features of the lap timer. That's all I've got for this how-to. I hope it was helpful. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe.